What if the ocean completely disappeared overnight? Imagine opening your eyes to a world where every drop of seawater has vanished without warning, where coastlines stretch endlessly into barren wastelands, and the great blue expanses of our planet have turned into desolate plains of cracked mud and salt. Ships that once glided effortlessly across waves now sit stranded on dry beds, colossal skeletons of industry marooned in silence. The smell of salt and decay hangs heavy in the air, and the sudden absence of the ocean is so absolute that it feels as though the very soul of the earth has been ripped away in the span of a single night. At first, confusion would sweep across coastal communities as fishermen wake to find their boats grounded in valleys of sand, their nets tangled not with fish but with dust. Beaches would stretch far beyond the horizon, but instead of sand meeting surf, the eye would meet endless, barren land. Ports would become graveyards of commerce, with containers stacked upon docks that now overlook nothing but emptiness. The shock would be overwhelming, for humanity has never known a world without the sea. Within hours, the crisis would deepen. The climate system, once balanced by the vast thermal engine of the oceans, would begin to unravel. The oceans regulate the heartbeat of the planet, absorbing heat, distributing moisture, and guiding winds across continents. Without them, the air would grow unstable. Some regions would plunge into extreme cold, while others would be scorched by unrelenting heat. Storms would vanish, but so would the rains that sustain crops, replaced by stagnant skies that no longer carry moisture from evaporating waves. Rivers that once relied on the cycle of precipitation would dwindle, lakes would shrink, and fertile farmland would turn to dust. Life that thrived beneath the waves would vanish in an instant. Millions of species, from microscopic plankton to massive whales, would suffocate on dry beds of sand. Coral reefs would stand as fossilized monuments, their vibrant colors gone forever. Fishing communities would collapse overnight, and with them the global food supply chain that feeds billions. Nations that rely heavily on seafood as a staple would face starvation within weeks. The disappearance of the oceans would tear apart not only ecosystems, but entire cultures that have revolved around the sea for centuries. Economies would crumble with staggering speed. Global trade, powered by shipping routes that once carried goods across oceans, would collapse as cargo ships sit stranded in deserts where oceans once flowed. Coastal megacities that thrived on ports and harbors would fall into economic ruin. Airlines, pipelines, and roads would not be able to replace the sheer scale of oceanic trade, and the scarcity of essential goods would trigger conflicts. Wars over resources such as food, water, and fuel would ignite as nations struggle to survive in a world where the lifeblood of global exchange has been drained away. As days turn into weeks, the absence of oceans would bring unimaginable changes to the face of the planet. The ocean floor, once hidden beneath miles of water, would be revealed in haunting detail. Vast trenches like the Mariana would gape open like scars in the earth, deeper than any mountain is tall. Entire ranges of underwater mountains would rise into the daylight for the first time, barren peaks of volcanic rock stretching for thousands of miles. The once unseen geography of the seabed would transform into a new landscape of valleys, ridges, and plains, eerily silent and devoid of life. Humans would be drawn to explore these newly uncovered lands, but what they would find is not bounty, but desolation. Salt flats would stretch endlessly, toxic and lifeless. Deep sea vents that once spewed mineral-rich plumes into dark waters would hiss uselessly into open air. Gigantic shipwrecks preserved in icy depths for centuries would lie exposed to the sun, their secrets revealed but their preservation doomed. Ancient artifacts once safe under the sea would decay rapidly in the harsh environment. The beauty of discovery would be overshadowed by the weight of loss. The disappearance of oceans would also strip humanity of a critical defense. Oceans absorb carbon dioxide, acting as buffers against the warming atmosphere. Without them, greenhouse gases would accumulate unchecked, accelerating climate change at terrifying speed. Global temperatures would soar, ice caps would melt unchecked, and deserts would expand with ruthless precision. Freshwater systems dependent on oceanic cycles would dry up, forcing migrations of people on scales unseen in human history. Entire regions would become uninhabitable, and billions would search desperately for places where life could continue. Civilization would be tested to its very limits. Cities would collapse under the pressure of scarcity. Refugees from once fertile lands would march in endless columns toward shrinking habitable zones. Governments would struggle to maintain order, while new powers would rise in areas blessed with underground aquifers or resilient crops. The struggle for survival would reshape nations, redraw borders, and perhaps even extinguish the concept of countries altogether as humanity fractures into local enclaves, clinging to resources. In the midst of this chaos, the psychological impact would weigh heavily. The sea has always been a symbol of mystery, of infinity, of connection. Poets and explorers have gazed upon its surface and drawn inspiration from its endless horizon. Without it, humanity would face not only physical loss, but spiritual emptiness. Children would grow up never knowing the sound of crashing waves or the sight of endless blue, and cultures defined by the sea would fade into memory. Religion, art, and identity would shift in ways that no one could predict. The collective imagination of humanity would feel diminished without the presence of the sea, as if an entire chapter of our shared story had been torn from existence. As humanity struggles to adapt, new systems of survival would emerge. Agriculture would shift to controlled indoor environments. Water recycling would become the most precious technology on Earth. Cities might relocate to former seabeds in search of minerals, building vast new settlements in landscapes that once lay hidden beneath waves. New industries might arise from mining exposed seabeds for resources once locked away under pressure. Yet such attempts to profit from disaster would bring little comfort to billions struggling for food and shelter. But even in these efforts to rebuild, the scars of loss would remain etched across the planet. Without the oceans, the Earth would feel smaller, less alive, stripped of the rhythm that has guided life for billions of years. The final reflection is sobering. If the oceans disappeared overnight, humanity would be left to confront its fragility in a way never imagined. We would discover that the oceans were not simply vast bodies of water, but the very breath and balance of the planet. Their absence would remind us that life as we know it depends not only on the land we inhabit, but on the waters that surround it. And so, the haunting question lingers. If we awoke tomorrow to a world where the seas had vanished, would we find the strength to endure, or would we finally understand too late that the oceans were the true heartbeat of Earth?